For 40 for For 40 years, I've walked the line between worlds and am well versed in death. But I want to have faith in humans. Give me something to believe in. Earth below me, sky above me, fire within me. Brought to you by UPRN Network. I'm Trish Mo, and this is The Missing Piece. Good evening, New Orleans, as well as the rest of the world. Today is November, 7th, and we are in the full Beaver Moon energy. My name is Trish. I'm the host. This is The Missing Piece, 105.3 FM New Orleans, and the United Public Radio Network, as we are also broadcasting live on Parapost Network. And I completely butchered that entire intro, but y'all are used to that. So, we've been having such glitches already, and it's just starting. But so, first of all, I do want to thank Carnation for sponsoring my hour. I'm so grateful for them, as well as the rest of the network. This is the time of year that I start using Carnation a lot, obviously, in baking and hot chocolate and such. So thank you, Carnation. And tonight I wanted to do something different because it's the time of year that people really kind of start. Well, for me, it's both. This is, since my birthday's in June and I'm a Gemini, this is like my dark half of the year. And all of my struggles and all of my everything comes up at this time of year. Well, not to mention it's winter time, so especially for witches, of course, we just passed. It's basically our New Year's, and this is the dark half of the year. And the weather, we here in Kansas, it rained for like 3 days straight over the weekend, and it kind of everybody kind of gets down, everybody starts kind of facing their shadow sides and stuff. So I wanted to step away from. I try to balance my involvement with the world of the paranormal and real life. Well, paranormal is real life, but my realities, um, issues and obstacles. So in honor of that, I found this creator. I don't know how I found you, actually. I think it was just a random. I'm always led to people in such odd ways. But my guest tonight is an addiction recovery and mental health content creator, Quinn Stone. And so welcome, Quinn. I'm so happy that you you agreed to be on my show.
Thank you so
Uh,
much, Trish. I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me here, and thanks for everybody listening.
yeah, absolutely. And like I said, people, and as far when people think of, I just encountered this today. When people think of addictions or mental health, there's such a stigma with it. Actually, even to this day. I mean it. Um, and I was talking to somebody, and they said, "Well, you know, I've never done drugs, and I've never been an alcoholic." And I'm like, "But you just told me how you can't get anything done because you watched the last 15 episodes of, whatever."
Hmm.
and and so there's tons of I like people to remember that there are so many. Don't judge people, y'all. Like, there's so many different things. It can be an addiction. You can be addicted to Starbucks. You could be addicted to um I don't know, anything, like um
Chocolate.
to yeah,
Yeah,
chocolate, too
yeah,
much TV, too
absolutely. I
much
mean, addiction is
shopping.
simply, yeah, addiction simply relates to like how much dopamine your body is receiving. I like to think that like the addiction isn't really about the substance. It's about the
Right.
dopamine, because our brain starts to get used to this constant flow of dopamine, and that's what we're chasing is this feel good feeling, right? The dopamine that's being released is what we're chasing. We want to feel that warmth, as they say, that comfort,
Hmm.
and that's why a lot of addicts are often people who experience some traumatic events, child abuse, domestic violence, things like that, because they that's why they turn to substance abuse, is because substance abuse gives you that dopamine flood that we didn't have as a child by
Hmm.
having a relationship with our parents, or you know not experiencing sexual abuse, or things like that. So I often say that addiction, in my opinion, for me at least, was more so about the I was addicted more so to the obsession that the obsession of escape that substance granted me. So because because I experienced those things at a young age, I felt very unworthy. I
Hmm.
hated myself. I had severe depression, anxiety, everything else. And when I discovered using a substance to escape who I was and mask who I was, using some substances, I could be funnier, or to me, I thought I was funnier. If I drank and got belligerently drunk, I would be funnier. If I, did coke, then I would talk a whole lot, and so that would, I'd be more interesting. Or, I was selling drugs to people, and so, that would bring that camaraderie that I was searching for, you know, that home. And
Hmm.
really, all that is dopamine. Um,
It's like an
so
escapism.
exactly. But I can actually really relate the spirituality to addiction as well, in the sense that the law of attraction, for me, when I discovered that escape, I was often depressed and very angry, very felt very guilty about what had happened to me, felt unworthy, and so I was living on this low vibrational frequency emotion. And by the law of attraction, the more I lived on that habitual frequency, the more the universe is like, "Oh, you're thriving in this environment. So let me, you're the neuroplasticity in our brains is adapting to living in this negative vibrational frequency environment." And so the universe continued to give me that. And once I started to raise my temporary vibrational frequency as often as I possibly could by going out into nature, learning something new, reading a book about something that interested me, working out, things that release dopamine on these temporary spikes of frequency, when I would come back down to my habitual, it would still be higher than it was before, because now,
Right.
I'm doing things to raise my frequency, and the more that I do things to be in that high frequency, the more I will attract high frequency things. And so now I just started to the more that I stay positive, the more that I make the right choice of staying sober and following my highest life path, opportunities are just presenting themselves left and right. It's really interesting. Perspective and frequency have been really, really important in my sobriety.
Now, did you find it hard? I know when I stopped doing like really what I they're all bad if done in excess, but I'm saying when I stopped like drinking and stuff and I started exercising more. Well, that was great, but then I became addicted to like exercising or I became, so it was something that was that was actually to an extent good for my body. but not, in excess. And the same with like working, since I wasn't partying and doing these other things, I became a workaholic. Did you find yourself like gradually, did you find it hard to balance things like that initially?
Definitely. It's probably been 6 months or so since I sort of changed my perspective on how my addiction worked for me.
Mhm.
I noticed that the reason I would continue to relapse is because my brain was searching for this constant flow of dopamine, of serotonin, of oxytocin, of all these chemicals that tells our body and our brains, "Hey, we're doing something right."
Mhm.
And I noticed that the reason why it was hard for me to stay sober was because sure, I would remove the substance from my life, but then I wasn't doing anything to add joy or happiness in sobriety. So to
Right.
my brain is telling me, "Why are we even sober? This isn't fun. We're getting none of the chemicals that make us feel good. We're constantly depressed. We're constantly angry or upset with ourselves or feeling unworthy or whatever it is, we're in this low vibration. Why are we sober? This makes no sense. We're getting all these feel good feelings if you would just go and get that substance. Go get that substance and we could feel amazing right now." And so my brain kept trying to tell me, kept trying to trick me, this is what we need. This is what we need to
Right.
be happy. And so having that perspective for me really changed a lot because I don't I don't look at those triggers as triggers. I look them at more as my brain is just has these residual neurological passages that are hanging on to whatever survival instinct that I had throughout my addiction. And so I've really changed my whole perspective on how addiction works in my brain.
I think, and I think that's important because especially, as children, when we have childhood trauma on top of that, the the cycle with kids is even negative, attention and distractions and things like that become, something their brain is. I know mine did, and like when kids act up and things like that, even from a very young age, um, it's like even though they're doing things harmful, um, and obviously what they're continuing to attract, yes, it's better than going, their bodies, it's not better, but their brains telling them it's better, their body's telling them it's better than going through sobriety and things like that.
Right.
Um, so let's go back to the beginning, the early days of Quinn, the the younger years, as far as what you're comfortable with. Where did you grow up? Where did you um I read a lot about, um, some parts of your childhood that you shared with me, and whatever you'd like to share with the audience would be great.
How censored do I need to be?
I I mean we the only censoring as far as like YouTube and Facebook, they don't care too much about, like, we have some cursing and such, but as far as, most of our shows aren't for children, so I guess that's if that answers your question. We do cuss occasionally and stuff. We just can't go crazy with it.
The
Uh-oh.
childhood had a lot to do with sexual abuse. That's where my feeling of unworthiness really started. It so I uh, well I moved here to the States with my mom and my brother when I was 4 years old. So my parents were divorced. My parents got divorced. We moved to the United States. We moved to a place. in Utah. I think it was Orem or something, and we didn't
That's a
speak a word of
rough
English.
first start in the United States is Utah. I just want just want to add.
Well, my mom had met some missionary when she was living in France. Apparently, they became close friends, and he was a great guy. They got married eventually, and but he wasn't able to have children, and so they didn't stay together. And my mom ended up meeting this uh, a manager of a Hard Rock Cafe in Salt Lake
Oh,
City,
wow.
Utah, and so she didn't know that he was an alcoholic and a cokehead, or maybe she did, I don't know, but he became very abusive after my sister was born, and, but
How
before
old were
that,
you then?
at that time, I was between the ages of 8 and 15, but
Wow.
before that, I w when we moved to the States and my mom was with this missionary, we had lived in this place called Pleasant Grove after moving from Orem. Didn't know much English, and my all the neighborhood kids would play and hang out after school, and some of the older kids, two of the older kids, a, a boy and a girl, they had to be maybe 4 or 5 years older than us. We were probably 5 to 7, and it just started being that game. Show me yours, I'll show you mine type of thing. And I mean, for 2 years, it was just constant, like touching, you know, I mean, everything from, like blowjobs and penetration and everything. And basically all the neighborhood kids were like molesting each other. And
Wow.
yeah, and at the age of between the ages of 5 and 7, when it was happening to me, not having a father figure and then having a language barrier with my mom, with the kids, with, being 5 to 7, not understanding how to express myself.
Right.
I specifically remember trying to say something about it, but my family, after talking about it with them, I mean, I held it in for 30 years. I finally talked to them about it. But anyway, they say
So
that
was
they
this
don't.
what year era was this in?
This was
We said 30 years.
1990.
So yes.
It was
Okay. So the early
1990.
90s, just to put
Yeah,
some perspective in. Yeah.
right. But so we were touching each other and stuff. I didn't really know what was going on. I was a young kid, didn't know how to properly express myself. I thought that I did tell some adults about it, and it got overlooked, and it just became something that I held within me. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just nobody cares. And when we moved a lot. So every time that I moved, I had this opportunity to recreate myself in some way.
Yes.
And so I just kind of let that part of me go. I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to talk about it. Nobody cared anyway. So I'm not even going to. But what I realized was that it wasn't even so much, after 30 years of holding all that in and then having the pain and resorting to substance abuse, the self the unworthiness that I felt wasn't even from what happened to me. It was it was for me the idea that we were doing that to each other.
Right.
And there was probably 5 or 6 of us there. And so I was doing it back, and I was a part of causing this kind of psychological trauma on other people.
Right.
And that is what hurt me. That is what really, when I was a teenager, I just had this guilt that I had hurt these kids and that I, would be unforgiven. And then when I was 16 or 17, I had this relationship with a girl that she ended up saying that I took advantage of her, and to me was like heartbreaking because I would never want to do that or make somebody feel that way.
Right.
So after holding that in, and then in my teens for somebody to be like, "Hey, you also caused me this pain now," it was like everything stirred back up, and then the trauma just came in and just slammed me. I was like, "Man, you're just worthless, and this is who you are, and you're gonna be some kind of like rapist serial killer like some crazy." I don't know. Just my imagination started going wild, that I was going to be this terrible, terrible person. And so I just started to self medicate heavily and just,
Do you
I don't
think
know.
were you more angry or like depressed or both?
I'd say I was more depressed because something in my mind hadn't clicked at that point that there's nothing that I could do to change what had happened. And because I'm not able to make amends with them, that I can just continue to make correct that situation by making a living amend to be better, to dedicate myself to helping people, to make a deliberate a deliberate action saying this is how I'm going to make up for XYZ, you know. I hadn't figured that part out yet, and so I was very depressed and yeah, definitely very angry. I don't know if there's more one than the other, but unworthy, like worthless is how I felt. That I didn't deserve to walk this planet because of what you should be dead, and so that's how I felt about myself. Like you touched other kids, like
Right.
you shouldn't be alive. Like that's how I felt about myself.
Did you now had you since that those things happened, had you talked to any of the other kids or well, you said you moved, right? So you
Right.
didn't keep in touch with any of them or
Correct.
have, so you wouldn't have known if any of them felt the same way or if, all of those things would have gone through my head like eh, are they suffering like me? Did you think things like that or um I mean some of them it's profound that you saw the entire situation from that perspective first of all. That's usually something that most people can't do until they're much more mature, not way past teenage years. Um, because it's just human nature to initially resort to like a victim mentality, from a young age, as far as in a scenario like that. Um, as far as thinking like, well, we all did it to each other and the parents should have done something or what I mean like so
Right.
it's interesting that you blamed yourself more so than automatically resorting
Well,
to
well, uh, to be honest, as a child, I didn't know what love was exactly. I had this idea, or at least my brain that was getting all this oxytocin from people loving me I thought I had an idea of what love was at a very young age because I loved my best friend. I thought that I was gay at a very young age because I loved my best friend. Like I wanted to kiss him for some reason because I didn't understand
right.
what this feeling was. Um, and I think that was eh, that that was the way that I was conditioned, is that I didn't quite understand what love was. And so as a child, thinking back, like I don't really even I remember I remember giving each other blowjobs and things. I remember, there was a girl involved and we were doing things with her. Um, but as far as me personally being really hurt about what happened to me, I was penetrated, and about how I felt really didn't didn't really bother me. It's like, you know what, I made those decisions. I screwed up. I was young and mistakes happen. That I could forgive myself for. You know,
Right.
I may have tried something, I didn't like it. I thought I was gay, then maybe I'm not, whatever. But to think that I did that to somebody else that may not have had a choice, that maybe they didn't have the same type of thinking that I did, or maybe
Right.
whatever, maybe their perspective on what was happening was far different. That is what really I couldn't get I couldn't get past. That's what I was really stuck on, is and then I didn't know how to reach out to those people or how to make amends with those people, or I didn't even have the courage to even say anything. I'm like, "Oh, well, what if they don't even remember and here I am, I'm gonna stir something up," you know? So, a lot of that was fear, and so it wasn't I don't know, I don't really look at it as the pain that I was caused. I just look at it as the decisions that I made, and but I can't speak for those other people. I don't know how they saw it.
Right. Have you ever considered writing? We were talking about journals and such, and you said you never wrote any. I mean nowadays, though, people can use like ghostwriters and stuff of transcripts. But have you ever considered that, like writing to the like a memoir? Of obviously changing names and stuff, but like to these people, how they say psychologically, like that's how you make amends with somebody you can't, who's either no longer in this world or not in your life for whatever reason. I
Right.
think it would
Yeah,
be
living amends.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I have thought about that. I so I just got sober October 1st of 2020. So I just hit 2 years,
2 years.
and
That's
from
amazing.
yes.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank
That's
you. Thank you, I appreciate that. I just got sober, it feels like, for me. It's been 2 years, but so I started using at age 15, and the entire time, not the entire time, I had a year of sobriety once, I had 9 months once, I had a month here and there, 2 months here and there, but for the most part, for the majority of the past 18 years, I was in active addiction, and I didn't really ever accomplish anything. I dropped out of college. I mean, I finished high school. I actually graduated early from high school, but after that, I couldn't hold a job. I was often selling drugs or robbing or doing home invasions, schemes, scams, something. I didn't really have any formal education, and so when I got sober, I decided, you know what, I basically am starting over from when I was 15. I mean,
right.
this whole life that I have built around addiction, I get to throw that whole life out. I'm changing my location, I'm changing my friends, I'm changing literally everything that I know about this old persona that I've created, this addict Quinn. I'm getting rid of that life, and I literally like cried about it and everything, like as if I like watched it die. And I started to paint this new canvas of who I wanted to be, and I started saying, okay, I get to recreate who I am. And so what I'm getting at is like I don't know a whole lot. I'm just starting out. with all this social media stuff, with all the Facebook following and everything. I mean, the Facebook following grew 150,000 in 3 months. I mean, it just came out of nowhere, and I'm getting all these opportunities, but like I have no idea what I'm doing. Somebody told me, hey, when I started posting videos, journaling my life, they told me, dude, you should be a motivational speaker. And in my canvas, I was like, boom, I'm a motivational speaker. I don't even know what that means, what it's going to take, what that entails, but that is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to just jump right in and I'm going to dedicate myself and I will learn along the way. And as long as I tell people, hey, you know what? I have no idea what I'm doing. This is just what I'm trying to do. Then maybe they'll be a little compassionate and they'll go easy on me.
So I want to tell you something. See, that's your perspective of yourself. Because when I first came across your a lot of your videos, I'm like, wow, I want to know this guy. This guy really knows what he's talking about. Like he knows exactly what he's doing.
Oh yeah, I've got a
He's got
PhD in drug and substance abuse.
no,
I,
no. I
I
mean,
went I
as
went for
far
18 years, and I can tell you anything you want to know about substance abuse
but I'm
or
saying
any kind of criminal activity.
as far as your speaking ability, your ability to a lot of people can say that they've had whatever experience, but that doesn't necessarily make them easy to relate to. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense. Um and I think all of all of the videos I've seen of yours, and the method you use, and just being real, um is something that I could relate to, and I'm like, wow, this is an amazing guy. This is someone that
Thank
um
you.
you, like I
I'm
said,
glad
you
it.
might think that you don't have everything figured out, and that's fine, and know what you're doing on social media or whatever, but that doesn't matter. You took the first step in sharing your story, and that motivates other people. That motivates people like me. That motivates my listeners. That's something that even kids that's happening to today. And I can tell you because I have kids myself. I have nieces and nephews,
Yeah,
and the stuff that they are doing that I hear about through even through hiring,
it's crazy.
in different fields, high schoolers and things like that. I'm like, you did what? Like you did
Right.
what at a
Yeah.
party? We weren't doing that. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, they do some. They're crazy. I
It's
mean,
scary.
we for us when we were that age, we were doing drugs and stuff, and we weren't really having sex yet, 16 years old, 15, 16 years old. It was still like, a couple of our friends were doing it, but not everybody. Now apparently all the young kids are having sex at like
Oh,
12, 13 years old.
yeah.
I'm
I
like,
was gonna
what are
say
you
there's
like,
like full
what?
blown orgies in middle school. You know what I mean? I'm like,
What the
what?
heck?
I can't
The
even.
internet is so wild that I
Oh,
mean,
yes. So that's what I mean by
that's just
you
crazy.
taking the first step to tell your story, and it gives other people courage to do the same. You know what I mean? Because telling your story is so freeing, first of all, and then you can worry about anything else as far as the
Absolutely.
logistics of social media and everything else. But getting that off your chest, especially the first time, like where did
Yeah,
you so you started telling your story on your own, um, just your own platform initially, correct?
I started on TikTok, and on
Okay.
TikTok, I started actually about a year ago. And I started with 0 followers and built it to 20,000 in a year, and that took, like, every single ounce of breaking out of my shell that I could get to. But the response on there, I don't know. I'm not sure if it's just not really TikTok's thing, but they don't push recovery content or substance recovery content, especially. They don't really push that in the algorithm. So it's for me, I found it difficult because I would spend hours researching, trying to do something intelligent with these videos, and then I'd get super discouraged because I'd see somebody getting, 10 million views on some video for 10 seconds. And I'm like, well, dang, I spent like 4 hours and this
Right.
person literally just like went like this and put a filter or a sound behind it and it's getting millions of views. So I got frustrated. I started posting to other platforms and Facebook just had a really great response. And so I kind of ditched TikTok. I'm still on there. I still post daily. I just don't respond on there as much as I do on Facebook. It's just also a lot better. There's just a bigger community that followed me
Mhm.
in such a short amount of time, and they seem to be relating to me too. And I don't really know how it happened. I just, I'm just going with the flow. It's just the law of attraction, I guess. Just being happy, attracting happy people. Um,
Do you ever go back and watch like some of your first videos and
I
actually grow
am
and
my
learn from
biggest
them?
fan.
Yes, yes, I was about to say, people get
I
so stuck on like follow how many followers they have and stuff. And one of the first videos I ever put out that I was so terrified to do, and now I look at it, I'm like, that's amazing because I don't care that nobody ever saw it probably or liked it or anything because it had like a copyright, whatever music I
yeah.
used or whatever.
It doesn't even
So
have
I
sound.
don't think you
Yeah.
even ever saw it, but I came across it a
Yeah.
year later, from when I started my journey. And I had said, it doesn't matter. Even if you only reach one person and that person is you, then,
Yeah.
and the fact that
It's a good
people
one.
were making fun of people for following their own, like liking their own stuff and following their, okay, you, that's your first problem. If you can't like and follow your own content,
Yeah. If you
then
can't support yourself, who's going to support you?
exactly. I'm like, so
Absolutely.
I had two followers and one was me. And I was like, all right. Like I
All
reached two
right. I
people.
got I got two followers.
I got two in a year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I was gonna say, I have I can't even remember. It's like 20 million views or something on one video, and I'm pretty sure that I am like 19.9 million of those views.
That's
Because
okay
it's
though.
just like I
Because
watch
that
my own
one
content and I'm
person,
like, you know what, Quinn, you're making some good sense today. I like this.
I think that's important in your own, your personal growth as well. And
Yeah. It
and I
really is.
tell people all the
Really what
time,
I
like,
started this whole journey for is to journal what I was going through. And so I love looking back a year ago from today and seeing
mhm,
what I was going through at that time. A lot of times it's very cringe for me. I'm like, oh man, just you got a lot of growing to do, and then it gives me that like happiness. It gives me that dopamine rush, like, hey, you're doing good. You're telling your older
yeah,
self that sh- just wait to see what's happening. Just wait to see what's
mhm.
coming, and then I get to be happy about where I'm at now because I see where I was.
You see
I'm
how
like,
far
oh
you've
man, you've got
come.
all this
Yeah.
growing. You got all this growing. You got all this great stuff coming for you. You don't even know it, and then it puts me in real time like, hey, that time is now. Like, we're doing something, so it's
You
really great.
know, when I first started putting my art out publicly and such, um, nobody would buy it. Nobody was interested in it. Nobody, and then it would be like 2 years later, I see all the stuff is popular now that I was doing back then. And at first I was like, wait a minute, like nobody liked my stuff 2 years ago, and now all of a
Right.
sudden it's popular and everybody. But then I turned my perspective around because life's always about perspective. And I was like, wait a minute, this is a good thing. I've already
You're a
created all
trendsetter.
of that stuff.
Yeah.
I've already created all of that. So eventually the algorithm in the world, whatever matrix we live in, will catch up. And I think so then then you could think, all right, well, I've already got my content for the last, you know, however long that people are gonna Um,
Repost it.
right, but that's why I'm saying you should do because all of that, the algorithm now they say is based on length of time a person has been committed to because a lot of people just start a platform and then they'll start another one because they think it's not doing anything and change the name and they'll go to another one and but but consistency in yourself anyways in your original goal and everything I think catches up, just have to
Yeah.
wait for
Yeah,
the
consistency is definitely the number one thing that I've noticed with social media. They don't like you to take breaks. If
right.
you wanna take, like, a 3-day break from posting videos or making any kind of comments or anything, the next time you come back, you'll have at least for me, what I've noticed, if I take a break for more than a couple days, I'll come back and post something and notice that the interaction is 50% less.
Hmm.
They just don't like that. So,
So
it's rough.
now when you say you started with going back to 15-year-old you, and that's when you started self-medicating, you started with different substances. When you say substances, did you start drinking? Did you start taking pills? What was your, I guess, first, or was it just a variety of things? Like,
Well, I guess so I started smoking weed, and that to me wasn't it wasn't okay, so I started smoking cigarettes. First off, I should note that the only reason why I ever saw a substance a as as an actual option for dealing with real life was because I saw that in my mom. My mom saying things like, "Oh, I'm so stressed, I need a cigarette." So,
mm,
me in my mind as a child, I look at that and I say, "Okay, so using nicotines is a way to relieve stress." I'm
right.
instilling that into a child's mind is what she was doing. So as a child, I see that as I can find stress relief in a substance. And so growing up, I when I found weed, when I found cigarettes, it was like my way of dealing with stress, and I didn't really look to doing a whole lot more. And I went through surgery, and they prescribed me Oxycontin, and then I got a whole different level of
Oh, I hate that. I wish
escape.
they would.
I
Man.
discovered that I was like, "Oh, holy cow! I've got this huge dopamine like release." And so this is that dopamine release that I've been searching for in a relationship with somebody close to me. I'm looking for
Mhm.
love. I'm looking for dopamine. I'm looking for oxytocin, and that's what this substance was giving me. So it started with weed, cigarettes. I drank, but I wasn't a heavy drinker because I'd black out really easily. And one time I was probably 16 or something. I thought that I went home after going to a Mexican restaurant, but apparently I stayed and partied for 2 more hours, and I didn't remember any of it, and that, for some reason, scared the heck out of me. I was like,
Wow.
"Oh, I'm not gonna drink a whole lot." But for some reason, uh, heroin was not was not off the table with constantly nodding out and things. I don't know. I don't know how my brain worked that way. I never really used alcohol as a means of escape. I've used it as a coping mechanism for my lack of confidence. Definitely, absolutely. I'd get belligerent at parties or something, or I'd drink heavily at parties to try and be more sociable or to make people like me because I didn't like who I was.
Mhm.
Um, but just to clarify as well, I am not abstinent. I am not somebody who thinks that abstinence is the only way to recovery. I I do smoke weed. I microdose psilocybin for my depression, my anxiety, and that works for me. Now, that was a decision that I had to make within myself. Am I using these substances to escape, or am I using them because I have a mental health condition?
Right.
And that to me was a life-changing perspective, that every single substance has a place in this world. We may
Mhm.
need to use, morphine if you get into an accident, you break both your arms. I'm not gonna tell the doctor, "Oh, don't give me morphine. I'm a drug addict." So
Right.
I can't expect to hold a sobriety in abstinence if I'm holding dear to the idea that I will lose my sobriety if I'm not abstinent for the rest of my life,
Right.
especially for somebody with mental health conditions. It's not fair for me to say, "Look, I will not be taking my mental health medications because that means I'm not sober." Because now
Right.
I'm choosing between being mentally healthy and my sobriety, and that's not fair. You should be able to be mentally healthy and sober. It's
Right.
all about how we use the substance. Substance abuse is exactly that, substance abuse. When we
Mhm.
start to use that substance as a way to cope with life instead of learning how to deal with things properly, that's when it becomes an issue. I wouldn't say that somebody who's taking some kind of mental health medication is an addict of that medication if they need it. If they're
Right.
abusing it, if they're snorting it, if they're, doing whatever, drinking a whole thing of, drinking a wine or whatever with it. Yeah, that's abuse, substance abuse. They tell you you're not supposed to drink with, pills and alcohol, whatever. That's not how the doctor's telling you to take it. That you're abusing that prescription. And so that is not healthy. But is that
I
person sober? Absolutely.
I agree. And now that I'm older, back when I was younger, especially in the 90s, shoot, that we were still in the age I've come across now, my parents are like almost in their 80s, and I've come across like magazine ads and such that had babies smoking. They were like, "Start them young," and blah, in
What the heck?
advertisements. That was
That's crazy.
normal. That was normal in the 40s and 50s and 60s,
I mean,
and
not
we
that
were
long
still.
ago.
Yeah, exactly. When I was younger, we were still able to buy the candy cigarettes, that like
Yeah, I
they
definitely
would
remember
puff
that.
out like whatever powder, but,
I think it's
like,
powdered sugar.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But still, it was we were acting like we were smoking when we were like 6 years old. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like
Yeah.
buying candy cigarettes, it's still the same thing. And so, um, I was, and like you said, your mom, and that's probably how she grew up too. When she said, "Oh, I'm stressed. I've got to have a cigarette." Well, in our parents' era and stuff, a lot of that was pushed in their face all the time
Right.
on TV, on drinking, and
Absolutely.
weight loss via cocaine back in the 50s. They had the magazine ads that depicted these women cleaning house after snorting coke,
Right.
and being a better housewife because of it.
Right. Absolutely.
That was normal
Or
to them.
amphetamines. Amphetamines was
Exactly.
a huge thing.
Which is crazy. It's crazy to us that like that, but that was their normal.
Right.
So we're
Yeah,
like at the end of.
my mom only taught me the coping mechanisms that she was given.
Mhm.
I don't blame my mom one bit. She did absolutely everything she could to be the best mom she could. Unfortunately, she was also never really taught how to be, how to have
Right.
a healthy parent relationship. So, but
And that's
yeah,
that's what I was going to say. I don't think kids in any era are ever really taught. We're always telling them what they should or shouldn't do, but we never teach anyone for that matter. Even adults are terrible at it. I'm terrible at it half the time. Um, we never learn how to deal with things. No, nobody. It's like the shutdown. Nobody was prepared for that. But you don't see schools teaching kids how to cope with that because they think,
right.
oh, it happened to everyone. Well, no. these kids, no, it didn't. Like our parents and their parents never had to deal with, well, depending on how old they are, but never had to deal with the entire world shutting down. You know what I mean? Never
Right.
had to deal with not being able to go out in public and play with other kids and go to a park for that matter, because I witnessed how it affected my daughter, being so young. She was in like second grade, I think, and then being homeschooled and not understanding why they couldn't be around people and why they couldn't. And even though it didn't traumatize us in the same way because we couldn't go to a park or whatever, it we don't think how it affects them at that's a huge part of their social
Yeah, definitely.
nature. And so regardless of what it is, I don't think that we do a good job. I mean, not anybody in particular, just as a society or schools or anything, in teaching children how to even confront emotions and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
that it's okay to,
I
you
mean,
know.
that's a whole plethora
Oh my
of
goodness, yes.
issues, the school
That
system.
goes.
And
It goes
God
from.
bless and bless all the teachers and everybody out there. But man, that the school system's got needs some revamping, desperate revamping.
Oh man, here in where I live, it's like Dangerous Minds all over again back in the 90s, literally. Like I think of some of these these schools as like as like Michelle Pfeiffer literally in the movie going into the and not knowing how to relate to these kids because they were all so traumatized, and so from everything from their neighborhoods to
Right.
drugs and abuse and domestic violence and everything else, like where do you start, you know um I think
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly where to even begin with that. One day, I don't know. Yeah, I think that prevention from that trauma is definitely the key. I don't know if we'll ever get to a point where there will be some kind of class in school, but that should definitely be a subject in school that you go to every single day, like for an hour, is like
hmm
just mental health. Like, what are you
yes.
doing today? Where is your headspace? Be present in your moment. Just an hour a day that they teach you in school to like how are you dealing with what you're going through right now. And I get that like kids are able to go through see a counselor or a therapist or something like that, but this should be something that is instilled into their lives. You need to be focusing on your mental health
Mhm.
at least once a day. You
Absolutely.
should be evaluating yourself, how you're feeling, and I think if we instilled that as like a habitual thing where people were actually able to communicate, I think that we would have a lot less problems. Hey, this is
I
how I'm feeling. I'm feeling frustrated because of this, and this.
And being able to voice that, I
Yeah,
think that I don't think it should stop at a school level. I think there's certain, there's a lot of businesses and corporations and stuff even adopting a lot of that now. And I think that's great because it happens to adults too,
right.
And
Definitely.
I remember when it was a few years ago, I don't remember where they were, maybe somewhere in California, some schools started, instead of punishing kids that got into fights or for bullying or whatever, by detention, by traditional detention, and not accomplishing anything, um, they started teaching them how to meditate.
That's a
And
great idea.
not just the kids that
Self
were in
control.
fights. Yeah, it was any of them that had issues. They start teaching them how to meditate. The rate of fighting and bullying and just general anything, racism, sexism, things like that, just the acceptance and the inclusion that the students at that school, I think it was a few of them actually, or maybe like an entire school system, dramatically declined as far as,
Interesting. I mean,
which I
that's
think is
not
great.
surprising. It's not surprising at all. If you just teach people to just take 5 seconds to reevaluate how you feel, I
Mhm.
think we wouldn't make a lot of the decisions we make. I know that myself, a lot of times I would act on an impulse decision and I would relapse because I was angry or was frustrated or depressed in that moment that I didn't take the time to ask myself, why am I feeling like this? Why am I depressed? Is this valid? Am I, you know, is it possible that I need to find an outlet
Mhm.
instead of using a substance to escape?
I also think it's interesting, we were talking about the full moon, and I was telling you how I have a lot of empathic people, and that's a relatively new concept, and um, which I also think should be taught. If it, since science has studied human energy in so much more depth, um, that we now know that it is 100% possible to pick up on someone else's emotions or what mood or whatever that is in your environment. Well, that would play largely on classrooms and playgrounds and stuff, obviously, as with the full moon energy. We always
Yeah,
talk about that because it affects animals, it affects the tides. We're made up of almost all water,
right.
so
I mean, it's
um
clear just by just if you ask any person who works in the first responders field,
mhm,
they'll tell you the full moon is the craziest night.
yeah.
I mean, and that's just proof right there that it's not. I mean, there is a difference. There's a difference. It's not
And
just so.
not just crime and stuff like that. I noticed when I was a table games dealer at a casino for a while, and I would notice during the full moon, like certain people, the rate of like heart attacks, um, even people passing out from um, like low blood sugar, things like that. It was always during the full moon. There's so
Really?
many health incidents. Yeah. Um, so I assume, that would affect people's mental stability as well during those times, on top of everything else, on top of adding any type of, I know working as a bartender forever, that was also the nights that there were the most fights.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's not a coincidence. I mean, our bodies are mostly water, so the tides are formed by the moon, and that's what makes the tides. So the gravitational pull that the moon is causing on the oceans is causing some kind of effect on us. And I don't know exactly how that works, but definitely can attest to feeling different on the full moon for sure.
So you said you've been sober now for 2 years, but
So I call it canna sober is what I call it. And that's so this is my company, the Sober, SOBR. It's like the first four letters of sobriety. Um, so that's where it started. But like I said, I'm not abstinent. But Demi Lovato coined this phrase, "Cali sober," and I don't really see how that makes sense besides like it being one of the first states to legalize or whatever. But I think Canna Sober just made more sense to me, and so that's kind of my brand is Canna Sober. I mean, it's sober, but like there's Canna Sober in the kind of like umbrella of that. But so I'm not abstinent, but I'm Canna Sober. So yeah,
and how long ago did you, or you just started kind of in this last year, as far as that company or
the
concept, I
the
guess?
the concept, the clothing company. This is like I said, I don't know what I have no idea what I'm doing. People are just like, "Hey, you should do this." I'm like, "That's a great
Yeah.
idea." And so people were like, "Do you have merchandise?" I was like, "No." but that's a great idea. So I just started making clothes, and this is the concept that I came up with. I spent a long time on it, just like thinking about what it is that I wanted to convey. And I think that being sober, whether it's medical assisted treatment, whether you're canna sober, whether you're abstinent, to me, as long as you're doing something that's working for you to live the best life you possibly can, then that deserves a title. Because we have all this
Yeah.
stigma out there that's like, you're not sober if you're, if you're on medical assisted treatment, or you're not sober if you smoke weed, or you're not sober. It's like, well, who gets to draw the line? Because technically, if you're not abstinent, then you're not sober. And abstinence includes nicotine, caffeine, any mind or mood altering substance.
Right.
It could be Tylenol. So, who gets to draw the line? I think if you're out there busting, if you're doing everything that you can to not be on the streets, homeless and pulling robberies and doing all these things, you're not in active substance abuse where this is like something that you're chasing. If you're actively working towards recovery, I mean, who isn't? Who isn't actively working towards recovery? So you in my book, you deserve a title. You deserve sobriety. You're not clean, because being clean in my book is complete abstinence. But if you're busting your ass, you deserve to be sober. You're sober in my book.
That's an interesting. I like that. Um, that's I
Because you got people in the rooms who are like, you're not sober because you're on medical assisted treatment, but the big book says that you're not sober if you're on any mind, mood, or mood altering substance, including caffeine or nicotine. But these people are out here in the beginning of the meetings smoking a pack of cigarettes and having 3 coffees. It's like,
right.
well, so what makes you sober? Because by definition, you're not sober. So that person is really just saying, hey, this is where I draw the line. My line is that caffeine and nicotine is sober, but marijuana and Wellbutrin is not. Well, that's where that person draws the line. Now here's where I draw the line. I say that you're not, this if you're not that. And the next person is going to say, well, this is where I draw the line because I'm on
Yeah.
mental health medications and I need mental health medications. So it's really, sobriety is really different to every single person.
I
So
don't
it's
know
not fair for anybody to say
why.
this is what it is.
I get in the same argument, and well, I wouldn't say argument because I worry about myself now. I don't what somebody else does, um, or how they perceive anything in their life or their belief system or whatever. If it is not harming me or affect me, what I mean. I'm 100% okay with people on my friends list on Facebook or wherever having different views as me, all of that. Because to me, and I get in this discussion with people all the time about even about like religion and everything, especially as a witch, like everything else, because I'm like, well, technically, the way I perceive you and the way you perceive me are completely different, also. The way we perceive everything is different. So, technically, as far as beliefs, as far as religions, there's literally billions. There's the amount of people, there's the number of people in this world. That's how many religions there are. That's how many belief systems there are. That's how many,
Yeah,
because everyone's is different. And so I
definitely.
think it's silly.
Yeah, I agree. I actually didn't know this until I started doing a little bit of research. When I started getting into spirituality and I discovered that in Hinduism there's all these different gods, I was like, oh, I thought that Hinduism is a polytheistic religion. It's not.
Yeah.
It's a monotheistic religion. They believe in one God. But all of these other gods, Shiva and Vishnu and all these other gods, they're they're just an interpretation
Yeah.
of that God. And so I'm like, well, I was mind blown. I was like, well, isn't that really what anything is? Like
Yeah.
isn't Christianity or Catholicism or Hinduism, whatever it is, aren't they all really just a depiction of somebody's perspective of what God is? It's all the same thing. We all
Yeah.
come from a creator. We all come from somewhere, and people have different names for it because they came from different parts of the country or different parts of the world or different and so it's like we're all describing the same exact thing. It's just got a different name for us because of where we grew up.
And that's
But
kind
it's
of,
all it's all God. It's all the
yeah,
creator or the universe or source, whatever you want to call it.
that's kind of the in New Mexico where I grew up, um, and my I have a Navajo background. The Four Corners prophecy is about different tribes basically coming from all four corners, north, south, east, and west, um, and to become one. Um, all the differences, all the just all the parts of the different. Basically on a larger scale, like the different parts of the world coming together
Hmm.
and for the same cause. And um, I think that's something that is amazing and profound about being able to reach people halfway across the world with your story, because um, it shows that, okay, even though you came from France to the US, but people in other countries, we might be different as far as our immediate surroundings, our cities and everything, but we still all have the same problems. We still all
Absolutely.
have the influences of drugs. We still have, all have these things going on, whether you're in Utah or in, Europe or Africa or India or wherever. So
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, we're all surrounded by people who have also been abused. You know,
I think we
that was
need,
a big thing for me was when I found when I decided to stop running from why I obsessed over escaping. I said, okay, the only way that I discovered relieved me of the resentment that I held against the person that molested me was by forgiving that person. And because know, I don't remember that person. Like I remember their name, but I don't remember their face. I don't remember, I'm never going to see that person again. So what worked for me was saying, you know what, I am no longer going to hold this resentment. I forgive you for the pain that you caused me. And it's not like I'm not letting him off the hook. Like what he did, that doesn't make what he did okay.
right,
But the more that I continue to let that experience hold me back from life, the more he is winning, the more that I am losing. Maybe he's not even winning, but I am definitely losing because I am being, stinted from being my full potential because of how I feel about my past. And I did that for 30 years. I wasn't who I wanted to be because I didn't feel worthy of that for 30 years. And the person who held that power from me was him. And so by forgiving him and saying, "You know what? I'm not going to be held back by this anymore." That that I took that power back so that I could be what I want to be without holding that resentment. And now when I think about it, like if I think of, if I have a trigger, I want to relapse because I feel unworthy, I can't hold it against him because I don't feel unworthy
right.
anymore because I forgave him for that and now I'm working on myself. So to me that was a big thing was finding forgiveness and understanding and compassion. And in my mind, I was like, you know what, this person, I was 6, 7 years old. This person was probably like 10, 11, 12 or something. And I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm like, where does a kid that age pick up that kind of behavior?
Yeah.
Was he being molested at home? Was he, was his father or uncle or, like where did that kid pick that up? And so that kind of helped me too, thinking, you know what, that kid didn't pick that up nowhere. So maybe he was experiencing something as well, and that I just didn't know. And he didn't quite have a healthy understanding of what love is, or what proper boundaries, or you know what proper touch is, and things like that. So that helped me.
I would not have believed it if someone told me even as recently as like 4 or 5 years ago, especially for myself, anyways. But I've also found that i- if I've learned a lot through my near death experiences, a lot of my past lives started coming back to me. And a lot of my trauma wasn't from this life, which is crazy and profound to think of. But a lot of my trauma, it wasn't even, not all of it even was necessarily from myself. There's certain trauma that follows your DNA. And this has
I've
been
heard that.
proven. Yeah, this has been proven in things. So for instance, in my own life, I fell when I was 2 years old on my grandma's fireplace and put my top teeth through my bottom lip, like, completely through it.
Mhm.
Ki
Dang.
minor thing, I mean, sure, it hurt and everything.
Right.
My daughter did the same thing on the exact same
Interesting.
day, at the exact same age, although it was worse, and she did the same. She fell and she put her teeth, she actually put her top
What
teeth,
the heck?
she only had 2 teeth on the bottom, put her top teeth through her bottom 2 teeth and, like, severed her entire gum, like, jawline. So with each generation, it gets
Sheesh.
worse.
Boy. I wouldn't
And
want to be in that chain.
well,
Holy
so I
cow,
started
that sucks.
researching this, and
That'd be horrible.
these things had happened, like in my other family member, like cousins and stuff, and their
Mhm.
parents had a certain accident or something when they were younger, and then they did, and then their kids did, and it was the same thing, but usually escalated one way or another, and the same. And I'm like, we're repeating cycles, not just from past lives and things like that, but literally from our DNA. And then I
Interesting.
saw this thing, this guy cut his finger off as an adult, doing whatever, um, halfway, like, to his first knuckle. And he had a son, and his son's finger never grew past the first knuckle.
Interesting.
So he didn't even have an accident. It just transferred that energy of losing an appendage to his offspring, which is
Interesting.
interesting.
Very interesting. And I mean that relates to, I mean, to me that relates to how powerful the mind is. Cause like was it was it the father getting his knuckle, like the tip of his finger cut off? Was it that, or was it the child growing up to thinking that he doesn't have one of those?
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like, because our brain will trick us too into
Mhm.
thinking, "Hey, like, that's my dad. I'm just like him. I don't have, like, this tip of my finger. It just doesn't
Right.
grow in my mind." And it kinda
That's
like, our brain is powerful enough to alter our own DNA, and that's how evolution is even a thing.
well, and even with haunted, especially on this network, a lot of people can relate to locations that are haunted. That's another thing. People are like, well, these ghosts aren't actually intelligent spirits, they're just residual energy and blah blah blah. And the place is haunted because there's been so much depending on what's happened there, or if there's been wars, or which I think is true to an extent. Yes, the energetic, all of those things create an energetic signature because energy can never dissipate. It's always there once created,
Right.
whether it be a thought or an act or a war or whatever, that
Mhm.
will never go away. You just have to transmute it. But then I was thinking, it's the same with people, like you were saying. are those places still haunted because everybody goes there with that perception? You know what I
Right.
mean? So it's like
Absolutely.
continually bringing up that same negative pattern.
I
And
agree.
the same with neighborhoods and projects and everything else. They've proven that it's that cycle because that's all they believe they'll ever be or
Absolutely.
do.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Definitely self-fulfilling prophecy. I find that super interesting. And when we moved into this house here in Boston, the house was owned, or the realtors, uh, somebody who owned the house previously was thought to be in the mafia, or like the mob.
Oh.
And when we first started moving all of our stuff in, we I had to gut out like one of the walls down in the basement because it was all rotted out. And I
Oh
am
my
a
gosh.
I'm a very I'm a very calm individual, but being in that basement just brought me such anger. And I got hurt down there, and granted, I got hurt pretty well. Like a piece of glass fell off and like cut my ankle so bad that I
Wow.
had to have stitches. But I didn't get stitches because it's just not a thing that I did for, throughout my addiction. I
Because you
never
grew up
went
in
to
the
the
90s?
hospital.
No.
That, yeah, exactly. But so the next day I go down there to continue working, and something falls right on the same exact spot. And I got so mad that I punched the wall, and I ended up getting a boxer's fracture on my knuckle. And just the energy down there, I was just so angry, and I never get like that. And I'm like, what the heck? Not too long after that, I had a friend come visit me, and she refused to come in my room. She was very she claimed to be very powerful intuitively, and she was like, you've got a bad energy in your house. She's like, it's the worst in your room and downstairs in the basement. And I was like, that's weird, because when I was doing work down there, I got like so angry for, which I would never, I would even, I just wouldn't get angry like that. I don't know what came over me. She's like, "Yeah, there's a bad entity in your house, like a bad spirit or some sort of bad energy in here." She's like, "I just don't like it. There's something going on." And I thought that was super interesting, because I even at the moment I couldn't explain why I got so mad that I punched something like that. It's like, that's just not me.
There's a lot of outside influence in the spiritual realm that people that don't know about it or understand it or believe in it. Um, that's another thing I've always talked about that should be taught to kids, because regardless of religion, it's energy and it exists and it is powerful and it can affect people in numerous different ways. That's another thing about there's been so many people that have had physical illnesses, even diseases, things like that, mental health problems, and then they're removed from a specific location or like a haunted place or whatever, and they're completely fine. And that
Hmm.
just goes to show like how powerful that can be.
Yeah, I've heard of instances like that too. Like, I was just watching a show actually just the other night that had something very similar to that. They were investigating, oh dang it, what's it called? The something walkers, the skinwalkers thing that's going on, the
Yeah.
skinwalkers. Yeah, they were talking about that same thing, and like the guy actually showed it actually showed the X-ray. Like this guy had this condition on the back of his head where it like grew when he was at this location. When they took him away from it, like he had to go to the
Mhm.
hospital and stuff. And when they took him away from that location, doctors like, we don't have any idea what that is, but like, it was grown. Like there's definitely something here that
Yeah.
wasn't there. So it's
There's
very
uh
interesting.
there's been times even when a few times, I'm a medium, but I didn't actually embrace that ability. I was terrified of everything spiritual and in the ether. I mean, whether it be ghosts or demons or extraterrestrials or anything up until a few years ago. And I was like, I can't live this way. So I confronted it, and but I remembered back my early 20s, I was possessed. I mean, I've been possessed a few times in my life, which is normal because I attract these things. Obviously, obviously that I can talk to them and see them, so I know how to deal with it now. But back then, I remember at the time, which was completely uncharacteristic in my life at that point in time, because I was happy. I wasn't like I had a good job. I was married and stuff, and it had nothing to do with any of that. It was within about a week or two period of time. I stopped eating. I stopped, my skin was literally like turning gray. My eyes were sunken in. And I would be around, I was hearing these voices, not like voices. I don't want to say it wasn't like in my head, but I would get these thoughts of stuff that's like, go poke your eyes out with with scissors like off the wall to harm myself or to harm others. And I'm like, okay, I stepped back, and I went on vacation away from my house. And I also met with different, I met with some Buddhist monks. I met with all kinds of people that were like doing all these rituals and things that I had no understanding of. And they said that I had a very dark entity attached to me. And and it was after that that I mean, they would tell me to do anything bad that could possibly, like, go walk out in traffic, go take these pills, go do. And I literally thought I was losing my mind, and that's scary that something can affect you, from an outside, um, that I didn't even think existed at the time, for that matter.
Mhm.
Um, oh, that's what I was going to ask you about. We briefly talked a while back. Well, first of all, um, before I move past that. The So one time that you went into cardiac arrest, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I
The
was actually,
date is profound. Go ahead. You can tell that story.
so I was in active addiction. I had been using cocaine and heroin heavily. I was selling out of my mom's house, and there was there was no furniture in the house. There was just like the bedroom set and the TV. And my girlfriend, or my fiance at the time, had just gotten out of jail like the night before. She she had been in there for quite a long time. I can't. I think it was like 6 months or something, or maybe even more than that. She was sober. She comes out of jail, comes and spends the night at my house, empty house, my mom's house. She was in Georgia. This was in Utah. Completely empty house, and I wake up the next morning with this pain in my groin that I could not explain. I was just like, I was pissing blood. And I told my fiance, like, "You've gotta take me. Like, you gotta take me to the hospital. There's something wrong." So she takes me to the hospital, and she I told her, like, there's I can't wait for the doctors to bring me some kind of painkiller. You have to go back home, get my dope, come back and bring it to me." And this poor girl, she did that. She went and got my stuff. I'm shooting up in the bathroom at the hospital, and they tell me, "Okay, we're gonna have to operate. You have a testicular torsion," which was one of my testicles wrapped around the other, and it was cutting off circulation. And so they said, "Okay, we have to operate. You're gonna lose it." I said, "Okay, so go ahead and operate, but well, the operation." And I my coronary artery just exploded. My heart rate skyrocketed and my coronary artery just exploded. Couldn't
Oh
handle
my
it. I
goodness.
went into cardiac arrest. I flatlined, and they put me on life support. They had a balloon pump that was going in through my femoral artery. I had the tubes in my mouth. I had the respirators. I mean, I was full on life support. I didn't know this, but there's different levels of life support. Some people don't need like the heart pump. Some people only need the oxygen. Some people,
Right.
whatever. There's different levels to it. Some people only need the heart pump to work halfway for every other beat. I was full on. I was dead without the machine. Like, they called my family. They said, "Come say goodbye. Your kid's dead." Like, like he's on full on life support. Like, you tell us whether you want us to pull the plug or what. And my whole family was living out of town. My sister actually had to come in from Montana, and being underage, she had to sign for them to keep me alive. So my
Wow.
sister, she was like, I don't want to pull the plug just yet. Let's keep him alive. So I was in a coma for 5 days, and when I woke up, I still had the tubes inside me. I still had all these, needles and things in my arms and everything, and I started freaking out. The last thing I remember was going under for surgery. I literally, like, I wake up, my family's around my bed, and I've got all these tubes and everything inside me. I don't even remember that. But they told me that I just started freaking out and tried to pull the tubes out of my mouth and stuff. So they put me back under, and they let me wake up the next day just on my own. When I woke up the next day, the date was November 11th of 2011. So it was 11/11/11
That's
was the day that I woke
crazy.
up,
Do you know what time it
and
was?
I don't I don't remember.
That would be interesting too.
Yeah, right. So I woke up on 11/11/11, which is insane. It's just insane to me because I thought that the world was gonna end in 2012. And, like,
It may have.
somewhere in my brain, I switched into an alternate universe.
I always
I
tell
died.
people that. I'm like, my world changed completely in 2012. So
I
if
hear
everybody
so many
died at the
people that
same
say that.
time, would any of us know that we were actually dead?
Well, there's this theory that says that, how they say when you die, you experience that flash, your life
Hmm.
flashes before your eyes.
Yep.
Well, apparently, that's like a measurable amount of time, the
Right.
time that your life flashes before your eyes. And so there's a theory that we did die in 2012, and like this is all just like the residual of that flash. Basically, we're basically just reliving the flash. So it's very
Huh.
interesting
That's
to think about.
interesting. Yeah, stars burn brightest right before they go out. So,
Right.
maybe with everything accelerating as far as, now the sun's like burning hotter and the earth's core is hotter and everything's spinning faster. And um, what happened, well, the first time I flatlined, well, no, that's not the first time. I had a lot of things happen before that, but the first time before 2012 was in 2008 for me when I flatlined having my son. And um the last time was 2020 and 2018. I had a heart attack on the same day, 2 years in a row, actually.
Holy
And
what?
yeah, so that'll show
On the
you,
same day?
the same day. Yeah. And so that shows you how something
That's
happened on
weird.
that day,
That's
apparently.
weird.
But as you were saying, when you have those flashes, the last time, well, no, in 2018 when that happened, and there's this giant, I don't know, light being. I had like 20-foot ceilings in my house, and this thing was almost that tall. And um, I couldn't see many of its features because it was so bright. And I didn't know at the time whether it caused my heart attack or whether it was saving me. But either way, I knew, and it was actually the day I got a tattoo on my finger that says free, and which was interesting. I had just gotten home from getting this tattoo that says free, um, and I had a heart attack, and memories, specific memories in my life, flashback. But what's interesting about that is in the last 4 years since, in some way, I've had the opportunity to relive many of those flashbacks, many of those memories, and make amends with them. Um,
Interesting. Like how so? Can you elaborate on that?
like, um, like if it was something to do with my family, like my sister, or my dad, or something that was traumatic, even some of these from childhood.
Hmm.
It's like almost like a movie, like you know how people do those picture scenes to reenact something from the past in the exact, like they have a certain scene with their siblings or their parents or
Like a
something, and they take
montage?
yeah, and they take a picture in the like now 30 years later or something
Oh yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
try to
Okay.
reenact whatever.
Right.
Well, that's
Yeah.
how it was, but it was for like traumatic events in my life. So these scenarios were presented, now at I was I'm 41 now. So in the last 4 years, um these things have been presented in the almost exact, like the same people with the exact same name will be in the exact same situation. They'll be a different person, but obviously, but it will trigger that memory I had, that flashback from when I died. And I've had the opportunity to look at it from a different perspective
Hmm.
and react in a different way and be able to forgive myself or forgive whoever, whether it be my sister or dad or whoever was there. And I think that was the purpose of them. But that might be like the flash, like you were saying.
Yeah, or it could be you like flashing to alternate realities. It said I
Yeah.
saw this theory just the other day that was talking about like that we are constantly shifting through multiple different versions of our reality like every second, you know.
I
Um
can see that.
a- and so I could see how you're at one moment experiencing how you would do it in this version, and then in an alternate reality or parallel universe or whatever you want to call it, be doing it in another way, and so you're getting some kind of like residual flashback of how you did it in an alternate universe or something. I don't know. I love conspiracy theories. It's really
And I've met on that note, because I hardly ever watch TV unless I'm like drawn to a certain movie or series or if somebody tells me to or something.
right,
Um,
same.
but I did see Multiverse and I was like, that's interesting because around that time when that came out, I had been meeting people that were like, I mean, we're naturally drawn to people that have similar interests in that. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about I was meeting people that had the exact same address as me, a few years ago, but like opposite, like backwards, like mirrored. But I didn't even realize
Interesting.
it until until I was like in that situation, it didn't dawn. I'm like, wait a minute, why does this seem familiar? Because that was my address,
Hmm.
so long ago. Or like I would meet people that had the exact same life story as me, as I mean, almost to a T, as far as things that had happened to us, things that had, our family members, things that where we came from, all this stuff, but we were complete strangers. Yet
Hmm.
they looked similar. So it'd be like another redhead that was, I don't know, a lot taller than me or shorter or skinnier or bigger, whatever, but just like literally different versions of myself, different names
Yeah.
and stuff from different parts of the world, but it's like we were the same person, just in a, different, and same, but everything else was, which is weird. If it was an alternate, well, I guess a different person would be an alternate version of it, of ourselves.
Yeah.
So
To me that makes a whole lot of sense because they say that the whole the universe, everything that exists is a vibration, right?
mhm,
It's a vibrational it's a vibration on a frequency. And so if you as Trish, let's just give you a random frequency number. Let's just say that your frequency number is 10. And if your frequency number is 10 and you're living out this universe, just by everything being made of vibration, of sound, of frequency, there's going to be things in this universe with the vastness of it that are going to be operating on your very same frequency. Like every
yeah,
person, every emotion, every object has a frequency on which it exists. And
yeah,
so if you're let's make it a little bit more complex so that to give a little bit more perspective, instead of being Trish at 10 frequency, let's say that you're Trish at frequency XYZ37456, and you've got like this huge long number that expresses exactly who you are, you know, and every single letter and every single number in that whole tag of characters expresses exactly who you are. One says this is how you act, this one says this is how you look, this one says this is the color of your hair, this one says this and that.
hmm,
So eventually the universe will vibrate out that exact same frequency. There's only so many frequencies of what can exist. And so it makes a lot of sense to me, in the sense that, like, you're meeting the people that are on your same frequency because you're attracting those same type of people. Like you're pushing out the frequency that you're wanting to attract. Like
that makes sense.
when
Even
we
with
are
pets, which is crazy.
when we're trying to attract something, it's best to like be what you want to attract.
Oh,
Because the law of
yes,
attr
definitely.
so the more that you act like a good human being, the more you're going to attract good human beings. The more you are a bad person, the more bad people you're going to attract. So like when you're attracting positive people and you're living on this frequency, Trish XYZ71, for all these different things, and you're living out your life path, your universe starts to align. The frequencies start to say, hey, this is where we're supposed to be, because it's like a ripple. When you drop a rock in a water, you get this ripple effect.
Oh,
And
yeah,
and eventually you will start to, that same thing continues and it repeats. And so Trish will eventually repeat. The exact same numbers that come out of Trish are going to repeat eventually. And when you're vibrating at these frequencies and you start attracting these people, it's going to start to it's going to start to align and seem like the more people that you attract are coming to be more like you.
well, even from a psychic medium standpoint of 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 your explanation, like, I learned this, which could be dangerous actually, and even for like spirits and people who are, paranormal investigators and stuff. I was drawn to certain like cold cases or murder case, or I'll even be drawn by a spirit to, like, say a murder or something that's just happened that nobody knows anything about. I don't even know anything about it. I'm just drawn to an area, and then all of a sudden I see energetically, when I touch things, when I touch, um, buildings or objects, or sometimes like the ground or trees, if there's enough energy there, I can see it replays what's happened at that point, and I see the people and the place and everything. So my mind or the universe will say, "Oh, so you're looking for who did that? All right, we'll bring him here." And that started happening. Like the actual person who committed the crime would show up while I was at the same location, and it became dangerous, you know. And obviously, I had told, you know, these were cases that I was led to, and I had told um, investigators or um, detectives, things like that. But that's where that the law of attraction, the universe doesn't know the difference when you're trying
Hmm.
to bring something in, you know, and target something, whether it be a goal or a thought or an action or a person in that case, you know, like missing persons, things like that. Yeah, y- it'll bring it to you because it doesn't know whether it's good or bad. The same with
Right.
diseases and illnesses and things like that. If you're, it's like
Absolutely.
hypochondriacs. If you're afraid of getting something, then you're going to get it because it doesn't know that it's bad for you. You know, it's
Right.
just bringing you what you want. So,
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was saying about my addiction is that, I started to thrive in that life of chaos so well.
right,
I literally had taught my brain this is how we survive. It was almost like you could think of it as like I was teaching myself to live out in the wilderness in a tent or in a cave or something. It's the same concept. I was teaching my brain how to survive in the streets, you know, around drug dealers and guns and needles and all this other stuff. And so my brain, the universe was like, "Hey, you're thriving in this. You're thriving in this energy, you're thriving in this chaos. Let me just continue to give you more." And it doesn't know that it's super toxic. It doesn't know
right.
that I'm like risking my life every day and that I'm in constant fear of being killed or robbed or whatever. The universe is just like, "Oh, you're thriving. Let me continue to give you what you're thriving in." So I definitely agree that, it doesn't really I see what you mean by saying, it doesn't really understand,
Yeah, I
whether
tell
it's good or
ghost hunters
bad.
that all the time because they'll get so involved in constantly that rush of their next investigation and of chasing spirits and all of this thing. And but that's bad because those are usually much lower level vibrational beings to be in that
Yeah.
state, that frequency. So for me, for example, as a medium to go into a place to be able to communicate with these lower vibrational spirits that are common at a lot of these touristy type haunted places, locations, I have to I have to prepare for that physically because I literally have to lower my vibration to communicate with them.
That
But
is
I all
so
that means I
interesting.
have to know how to raise it and not let that consume me. And a lot of people are consumed by that and get depressed and have physical, you'll hear about people in the paranormal world having heart attacks, mental breakdowns, all kinds of stuff all the time, but it's because they don't balance that lifestyle. That's why I don't do focus specifically on crime and murder and ghosts and scary things and wars and everything all the time on my show because
Mhm.
it y- it would consume me, you know. So,
That's super interesting because when I was living in the I felt like I was kind of vibrational frequency, like shame and guilt and anger and all. I started to have what's it called? Sleep paralysis,
uh-huh.
where in my dreams I would feel like there was this weight on my chest, and I just had that feeling that it was a night. I couldn't quite tell at the beginning of the dream nightmare. I could just feel there was a demonic presence of what I was dreaming about. I'd go throughout this dream and eventually something super what happened. There was a lot of wiz in my dreams. There was a lot of dark entities, very dark things, shadow figures, red eyes, sounds, things like that. That it would happen often. And since getting sober and out of that frequency, I have not had any kind of sleep
Oh yeah,
paralysis dreams. So it's very interesting because,
because
you
you
know,
stop.
I was
It's the same
on
thing. You
that
stop
low
attracting it.
vibration. Yeah, and I strongly believe that it's those low level frequencies you're talking about that we're able to, I don't know, somehow, have a reaction or some kind of influence on my brain and you know being affect me through sleep paralysis. I was living on that vibrational frequency where those the same demons exist.
And that's one thing people are like, well, Trish, how can you go into, it's happened numerous times where I've gone into places and this demon that is said to exist there doesn't affect me. And they're like, well, there must be something wrong, or you must be that kind of a witch or whatever, that this demon does not affect you. No, it doesn't affect me because I have already conquered that demon. Quite literally. I have already conquered that frequency. It can't affect me anymore. It's not going to affect me. Now, there are still some that will affect me. I'm not saying I'm completely immune, but I've learned that certain things like that, it's literally like, the steps to ascension in people's lives, because then I'll recall the last time I felt that vibration or that frequency was at a certain time in my life when I was affected by something very dark and demonic and whatever. And the steps I had to take to climb out of that to overcome that. So now it doesn't affect me, of course, you know. And I think that's with anything we conquer in life, whether it be public speaking or the internet or followers or whatever. Like, obviously, different levels, different devils. We're never
Yeah,
going to be completely, or to be able to completely avoid everything bad in this
right.
world.
I have a
We just learn how
question.
to deal with it.
Are you, this is probably gonna sound ridiculous, but are you afraid of the dark in any way? I'm horrified. Uh, I get like this terrible feeling anytime I'm in a completely dark room. If it's nighttime, I just get this terrible feeling that something wrong is gonna happen. And I personally have never been physically like awake and been affected by a spirit. I have seen things that are super unexplainable, but I personally have no cool explanation of why I'd be afraid of the dark, but I continue to be like running up.
Oh, I think you
At,
froze.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Do you ever get that?
Yeah, I was terrified of the dark up until I was up until like 2 years ago. Sometimes I still get that, but what I did, it was a point in my life where I'd given up on everything. I had been abducted so many times, not only um, by interdimensional beings and extraterrestrials, but like the military abductions and things like that. And so I had associated the darkness, and I had bad dreams. From my time I was little, every night of my life, I was one of those kids that like laid there in the middle of the night sweating under my covers, terrified, knowing that if I went to my parents' room, I would get in trouble, but also knowing that that seemed like 10 miles across the house because their room was on one side of the house, mine was on the other. And that distance between there, I would see 50 different spirits, or some of them monsters, some of them things I couldn't explain. And always being told that that didn't exist and nothing was there and all this stuff. So even as an adult, that transferred over to my life. And I was and being, I'd had houses broken in, every house I'd had broken into, um assaulted and almost robbed and things like this. And in bigger cities and numerous things in the dark. So I always associated it with bad things. And so finally, um, I was like, I went blind for a little while when I got Lyme disease initially, and so it was always, it's always dark for me. And but it's like I could see better when I was blind because I used my other senses. So I realized that the reason I was afraid of the dark was because I would get anxiety and my other senses would shut down. And
Interesting.
finally, I was like, no, I'm not going to live this way. I'm going to do this. Like, I sat, it was almost like a meditation thing. And that's how I started. I'm like, I'm going to sit in the dark because it was one of those points where I'm like, I'm done, whatever. If you're going to come take me, then take me. And, and then nothing happened. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what I was so afraid of all this time. It's one of those things. Um, and then an interesting thing, I started being able to see it. It was it's done a lot in in native beliefs and such and pagan. I would envision myself having the ability to see in the dark, like an owl or like a wolf or like a panther or like some type of animal that I respected, that I thought of as powerful. And I started being able to see in the dark better. Like I could see anything. I'd go out and I'd be like, "What is
That's so
this?"
funny.
No.
I was just talking to my brother. He was like, "Do you remember when you were a kid, you used to think you had wolf eyes?" Because I could see in the dark. I swear, I'm not
Yeah,
even kidding. Like I told my brother,
believe it.
like I thought that I was like, I have wolf eyes. I thought that my eyes glue in the dark. I was like, I'd be like, Pat, can you tell that my eyes are glowing in the dark? He's like, no, they're not. And I'm like, I have wolf eyes. He's like, no, you don't.
Well, it's been shown one of those things that it is absolutely mind over matter, and that's where um a lot of those beliefs come from because then you start adapting to like it's the whole, I'm a licensed certified clinical hypnotherapist. And um what's the saying?
Jeez, you do it all.
The Not really. I just um when you assume trance, um then trance, whatever your if your higher conscious um believes in something, or you program your mind, it's like neurolinguistic programming to believe that, and it's not harmful to you if it actually helps you in some way. um it's been proven scientifically that your body actually starts adapting in that way, and that's how you can heal that's how I healed myself from a lot of those things, because um it's reprogramming your higher self, which is what your subconscious or always stops us from doing. So,
That makes
but your
sense.
higher conscious will never do anything to harm you. So if it's something that's going to help you, then it'll allow it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh my goodness, it's already 10:25. I do this all the time.
10:25.
Well, my time. It's 11:25 your
Well,
time. Well,
yeah.
Quinn, tell everyone where they can find you.
I am most active on Facebook. That's Quinn Stone. I believe the forward slash is QS Motivation. Actually, I know it is. I also have my TikTok, which is Quinn.Stone. My Instagram is Quinn Stone Motivation. My YouTube is Quinn Stone Motivation. I have this sober clothing company that all the links can be found there. There's probably the easiest would be my TikTok, Quinn.Stone. There's the link tree there, or Facebook at Quinn Stone. So Yeah, link trees over there. All the things that I'm getting into, the clothing company. I also have a Patreon where I hold weekly sessions that we get together as a community. We talk about addiction recovery, substance abuse, domestic violence. We have we have what else? We're going to be starting a podcast here in January, but and then that's what I was going to mention for the weekly sessions on my Patreon. We also do weekly sound bath guided meditations. So I have the crystal sound bowls where I do a sound bath. My sister does some kind of guided meditation, or I do a guided meditation during. So yeah, it's been really awesome discovering spirituality and all the different opportunities that are coming my way. So I really appreciate you having me on. It's been an honor.
Absolutely.
It's been great speaking with you. I really appreciate it.
I'm excited to follow, your journey and to see your next steps as well. Like I said, I know you think of yourself differently, but for me, when I first saw you, I was like, this is someone who is absolutely an inspiration to me. And um, when I started rebuilding myself, I'm like, I want to be able to talk to people and connect with people who um, absolutely have the right idea of not going backwards um,
Definitely.
and and having goals and taking that step, because that inspires people like me, and I'm sure it does to people all over the world. So
Well, thank
um,
you.
I love your content. I'm so happy you were able to be here.
Thank
And thank you to my audience. As you know, I will post um, Quinn's links obviously on my YouTube site and everything, and as well they will be replayed on all of your major podcast stations. So thank you for joining us. Be careful with that full moon energy out there.
Definitely.
Stay yes, stay safe. Thank you again to Carnation, and we will see you again next week. So I have no idea where my outro is, so y'all are just gonna have to look at us till we freeze or something. So have a good night,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I appreciate all the listeners too. Thank you.